Hello, hello. Welcome to the Risk Rundown. This is our Halloween episode. And Tyler, I am very disappointed that you didn't come with a costume. So you have a smaller child. You
I
celebrate,
do. I have
right?
a 6-year-old, and
So so please tell me, what would you dress up as if you were going to be dressing up?
well, funny you should ask. Actually, for the last 20 years, I've dressed up as a samurai. I've got the same outfit each and every year. My wife's like, "Can you please switch it up, once in a while?" Because I'm always dressed up as a samurai. I've got the sword. I've got the outfit.
I could have seen you as like a Power Ranger.
Oh yeah.
A Power Ranger. I could have seen a red Power Ranger.
I got home last night. My little guy was actually dressed up as a firefighter. So it was really cute. 6-year-old firefighter. The last 2 years, he's been Spider-Man. So we're, progressively graduating to new costumes, but it's really exciting.
You're right. So we are going to do a little thing called a rapid fire, and I'm gonna and we didn't talk about this, but I'm just gonna give you a few scenarios, and you're gonna tell me if it's a tricky type of situation and claim situation, or if it would be a treat for the client to just get paid out easily, right? So it's a trick or a treat. So first scenario, there's a mysterious disappearance of a very expensive bottle of wine.
Well, was that bottle of wine disappearance due to consumption? Or was it
No, because
just
that would definitely be a treat. At least for me, that
correct?
would be definitely a treat.
Yeah, consumption is not covered by the insurance policy, but mysterious disappearance, absolutely, it's a treat. That's something that's covered by the insurance policy and something that, a client would get paid out for whatever coverage they had for that bottle of wine.
But also, it may or may not, depending on the cause of loss, right? And you may have to have an extra insurance policy to have that bottle of wine covered, right? It's not just necessarily always covered underneath your contents coverage.
Oh no, actually, my apologies. So the caveat to that is that they need to have it scheduled, right? So if you've got an extensive wine collection, that goes for any collection for that matter. If especially if it's got a per item limit of over like $10,000, we highly recommend that you schedule those items because if you do have a mysterious disappearance, it's going to be covered under that policy.
Okay, so honestly, if it was underneath a valuable articles policy, it could be a treat because, right, it could be a very straightforward claim. But if it wasn't, then it could be very tricky. Okay, scenario number two, you have a ghoulish gathering at your house, and all of a sudden someone gets injured and something goes wrong. Is it a tricky scenario and tricky claim, or is it a treat?
Oh, that's very tricky, right? Because was alcohol served? Right? Was there unsafe conditions? Who was attending this event? Was alcohol served with minors present? Right. So a lot of these things are very tricky. And listen, our clients unfortunately get sued quite often for this type of situation. So I would gander to say that, if there is, an umbrella policy in place, if they have liability coverage on their homeowner's policy, the defense coverage would be covered under that policy. We always recommend, hey, that defense coverage is actually one of the most important aspects of liability coverage because that can rack up, fees pretty quickly, depending on the law firm and who you're using. So, yeah, very tricky situation.
Third and final scenario, tricky or treat? It's a dark and stormy night, Tyler. It's dark and
I love
stormy.
the premise of this question.
It's a dark and stormy night, and it's really, really windy. And your neighbor's tree, not your tree, but your neighbor's tree falls on a fence and your house. Tricky or treat?
Well, it's tricky for the fact that, could you subrogate against your neighbor? But it's a treat because that's something that would be covered under your homeowner's policy.
So we get a lot of questions, right? People think since it's the neighbor's tree that it automatically is their insurance, but honestly, it's not. It's your own insurance, not unless for some reason that the tree has been dead for years and years, and there's been conversations about that it's a hazard and all that different kind
Yeah,
of stuff,
neglect
right?
to the tree that wasn't properly maintained.
Yep.
And insurance in general, we have to remember is sudden and accidental, right? If it's sudden and it's accidental, there's a good chance that's going to be covered under your insurance policy. But when you have neglect and you've known of the issue for some time, that's where it can get very tricky.
And the thing is that there's like, it's sudden and accidental, and there has to be a trigger event within the contract of the policy, right? So that's the thing, that there has to be a trigger event in order to trigger coverage. That's kind of how I tell people there's a trigger event and there's trigger of coverage. And that's when we can kind of dive into, if there's coverage or not. And we are actually very fortunate that Alliant Private Client, we actually have a whole dedicated claims team, right? We have a whole team that can help our clients do those types of things, and kind of when the rubber hits the road, that they can help them walk through that and hold their hand through that process. So do you have any kind of interesting kind of scenarios?
Oh, we have so many different scenarios. And actually, I got on the phone with the head of our claims yesterday just to have a conversation. What are some kind of interesting claim scenarios, situations? Obviously, we deal with, the auto claims on a daily basis, even property claims, losses with water. But because it's Halloween season, right? One thing that he brought to my attention, and I didn't even think about this. So a lot of people have Halloween parties, right? And in those Halloween parties, they are dressing up in some scary or spooky costumes. And when you come to the door of that home, and if you have a dog and they see you as a threat, there is a possibility that they could attack because they're defending their owner, right? If
Yep.
it's a threatening situation, if you're wearing a threatening, costume. So something to just be aware of. Dog bite claims unfortunately are a thing, and there's actually certain dog breeds that have exclusions on the policy for that very reason. So just take care of your pets, during Halloween season. Why don't you share some scary or spooky situations around collectibles? Because obviously our clients collect some pretty outrageous items that we're familiar with, right?
They do. They do. And that's, to your point earlier, is that this is when we need the additional coverage, right? For the unique scenarios and the unique assets. But there have been all sorts of collectibles and artifacts, right? It could be movie memorabilia. It could be locks of someone's hair. It could be a movie star's bed. It could be Egyptian artifacts of like mummies and sphinx and coffins and all sorts of different kind of stuff, right? And those are all kind of very unique, kind of mysterious kind of things to collect for sure. But they can be very valuable and sometimes irreplaceable for sure.
So what's another one you got?
So I know that with car accidents, one of the scariest things is when my kids were starting to drive and that they'd have kids in the car with them, right? And I know that on previous podcasts, I've talked about my son's car accident and how scary it was for me. And, he had flipped his car bumper to bumper 3 times. And thankfully, he was completely okay, had a scratch on his finger, but that was it. But those types of scenarios are very scary for a parent. And especially if you have your child has a friend in the car with them, right? One of the things that we actually talk to our clients about, and I know we do across the entire Alliant Private Client, is the uninsured, underinsured. And if you or your child or someone in your household is driving and gets in a really bad car accident, that uninsured, underinsured is not just in case someone hits you that either doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance, but it could be they're walking across the street and they get hit by a car. It could be that your child is is a passenger in someone else's vehicle that doesn't have enough insurance. And there have been scenarios that here, you know, in the Mid Atlantic, that there have been scenarios that kids have gotten. There've been, let's say, 5 kids in a car smashed into a car, right? And they're exceeding the speed limit, and they get in a car accident, and all of a sudden, there's unfortunately major injuries, and all of these passengers are now suing the parents of the driver. And is there enough coverage? And so that type of thing, the whole minor and you know kids driving is, you have children of driving age. It's a very scary thing every time they leave the house. So those are all scenarios that it's just really important that there's proper liability coverage and proper coverage across the board.
Nope. You speak truth here, Julie, that uninsured motorist coverage, you can't depend on the individual that caused the accident to actually have full coverage or full limits that's going to protect you and your family. So that uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage protects you and your family. And And hopefully in that event, Julie, if your family or your loved ones are injured in an auto accident, that's the coverage that's going to help you rest at night knowing that your family is going to be properly protected and covered.
Yeah, there's actually even scenarios like beach homes, or it doesn't even have to be a beach home. The one that I know is just a beach home that someone is there's a whole bunch of people on a deck, on the back deck, and all of a sudden the deck falls. And there's multiple injuries, and now the homeowner is getting sued from every which way, right? And so one of the things that people always say is, we scare us insurance agents, we scare the daylights out of everybody, right? And it's kind of we kind of do, but it's the only way really to kind of hit home and make it personal to people that, oh, I do have a kid driving, or I do have a home with a second story deck, and it could collapse. It just kind of hits home to people about how the insurance could relate to what they have and their assets.
The liability component, though, is probably the scariest component that our clients have to deal with. Because if you are sued, and again, you can be sued at any time, anywhere, for any reason, right? And there's two things. Number one, the defense cost. That can really drive up, the cost of the umbrella coverage itself. That defense cost is embedded into it, and make sure that you're being properly protected. Because if you have to go out on your own and get your own attorney, boy, those hourly, invoices are going to rack up pretty quickly. So it's
Yeah.
important that you have that defense cost. And then secondarily, in the environment, if you have significant wealth, and people, it's so easy to find information on people these days, to find out what their net worth is. So if you are sued and you don't know exactly what that number is going to be, we're always going to err on the side of higher limits versus lower limits. But obviously that coverage is really important to make sure that in the event of a liability claim, that you have the appropriate amount that's going to cover you, your family, and your assets. Because
Yep.
no one wants to make that call to their wealth advisor. Hey, I have to liquidate some funds because I just got sued, and now I have to pay out a certain amount of money in this court order.
We've said a lot of spooky stories, and a lot of sometimes people think that our job is to scare people to buy insurance, but they really are all true scenarios. And so it's one of those things that I think it's just really important for us to educate our clients. But thank you so much again for everyone joining us and listening today. Please put in the comment field different things that you all have experienced. And remember, for the risk rundown, always stay safe and protected.
Thanks, Julie.